for another night besides National Hotel. People just do a collection. So.
Hello and welcome to Inside Minneapolis. I'm Phill, Lindsay, your host, and on this edition we're going to take a look at a lot of things going on along the Lake Street corridor, including some of the historic amusements and attractions that were along there. We're going to take a look at some of the success people have been having along crime issues. We're going to be talking about new developments, and there's a lot of them along Lake Street. But first, let's go and meet Ron. He leads people down the 21A bus line.
I've driven at 21A about 2 years now. I've driven most of the other routes though, your 2, your 3, your 4, your 17, your 12. I even drove to 6 for a while. This 21A is a good route though. There ain't a day that goes by I don't say, shoot, I've never seen that before. Well, it's a different kind of people, see? Poor, sometimes I bet there ain't $2 on that whole bus. Weary, some of them people have been through stuff a cat wouldn't live through. Crazy, there's no way. They're just as sane as you or me. Little odd, most of them. I don't know how they keep from cracking up.
Well, what about you?
Me? I go up north fishing with my brother-in-law. That would be Ray. Oh, cripes, we catch the fish. Last year we limited out on northern and walleye both, and the beauty of that country, shoot. We're sitting there casting by the shore. I seen these 4 deer come down for a drink. I says, looky there, Ray, I'd give $100 for my deer rifle right now. See, we got another 3 months before deer season, so I just threw a rock. Hey, you should meet this guy, Ray, though. He runs a chicken farm with my sister and 2 kids. That would be Joe and Bill. But these chickens, you don't eat them, see? Ray teaches them how to play tic-tac-toe and then sells them to fairs. He makes good money, and they are good, boy. Shoot. I tried all day, never could beat this one. Oh, but these chickens. At these fairs, they're in these little boxes, see? And pretty soon some of them chickens start to crack up. Well, look, at 1 minute they're a chicken running around on a farm, and the next minute they're in a little box trying to outwit a human. And when they lose just once, might as well start mashing the potatoes. You know, the way I see it, we're all in some kind of a box, you know. Sometimes you find your way out, sometimes you're stuck, you know, like a chicken. And then it don't matter what route you're on, a 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 even. I got this theory about people that thrive in boxes, but that'll cost you a cinnamon triangle and a cup of coffee at the Super America. Hey, what's that crunchy stuff on them cinnamon triangles anyhow? Oh yeah?
Yeah, so we're just okay, all right.
Well, that was a fun look at a very fun and sort of classic in Minneapolis, a classic piece of theater by Kevin Kling, and we thank him for sharing that with us. In this edition of Inside Minneapolis, as we said earlier, we're going to take a look at a lot of issues that have developed along Lake Street, and first off, we're going to look at some of the amusements and the attractions and how Lake Street developed as a major corridor in Minneapolis. And with us again, welcome back, is Dave Wiggins.
Hi, Phil. Good to be here again.
From the Minnesota Historical Society. Man we often go to when we want to find out about some of the origins of things that were going on here. Let's start way back. We now think of this as Lake Street, very busy corridor, but it wasn't always. How did this street develop from its earliest times?
Well, in the earliest development, this community, a lot of things were tied to Old Fort Snelling, and some of the earliest things we know about related to Lake Street are on either end of it. One across the bridge over where the Town and Country Club golf course is now was a hunting camp, and there was also a fishing camp on Lake Calhoun that the Fort Snelling officers used. But this developed in the settlement period of the 1850s, and that is the outskirts of town. You're really a little bit more than a comfortable walking distance into the city core, and there was
Which
still
is right
plenty
down
of
by
real
the
estate.
river and
Sure, right by St.
downtown.
Anthony Falls,
Yeah.
that's right. So this was maybe an appropriate place to have a cemetery, like the cemetery that's now at about Cedar Avenue there, the Pioneers Soldiers Cemetery.
Oh, right, and that's the oldest cemetery.
That's right, and that is a cemetery dates to 1858, and then Lakewood Cemetery came in 1871, still here on the outskirts of town, and there were farms around here at that time too.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And I believe there was an Indian village right overlooking Lake Calhoun as well.
There was what was called Cloudman's Village that was set up on the east shore of Lake Calhoun, and it was an experiment run by the Indian Agency with some people hired by the agency, the federal government, to try to teach the Dakota people farming. Cloudman had asked the Indian Agency to do this, to learn modern ways to avoid famine and that sort of thing. So that was one of the early examples we have of an Indian village actually within the city limits of Minneapolis. That was in the late 1820s, early 1830s out there.
Okay, so that was a century and a half or more ago.
That's right, back in that Fort Snelling period.
Right, and then as we get closer to the turn of the 20th century, the city started slowly to come out south a little bit.
Well, not too slowly, actually.
Oh, is that right?
The 1880s was the great boom time for Minneapolis. All the connections were made to the context for the city out in the Great Plains. The rail lines were pouring in wheat, and the city nearly quadrupled in size with massive amounts of immigration coming in.
Okay.
And so as they looked at how the city was going to expand, it was obvious that there were going to be real estate opportunities, so they looked to expand the city boundaries out from Franklin all the way south now, and including Lake Street in 1883. But the concern at that time was often that the whole thing would go up in flames. Most everything was being made out of wood at this time.
Sure.
And so as they were looking at fire prevention strategies, H.W.S. Cleveland, who was advising the city on how to lay itself out, proposed using Lake Street as a grand boulevard would not only look nice, it would also serve as a good fire break should the fire start to take off.
That was wise thinking anyhow. And then Lake Street started developing slowly. There were nodes where some commercial activities would start to take place, the occasional home, I take it.
That's right.
Some residential.
Yeah, you saw homes spotted throughout when this was an agricultural area too, but it started to really get going in the 1880s, and especially up towards the lakes, as that area was really under a lot of development. You saw with the development of the streetcar system, it was much easier to get into the city core, and as the streetcar system expanded here, these areas south of the city became really pretty active neighborhoods. The area of Lyndale and Lake Street around the turn of the century was a very active shopping area, almost like the Southdale of that time.
Oh, really?
As they were expanding, they wanted room, and they had enough acreage around here to do all sorts of things.
Well, it was around the end of the 19th century that a number of major amusements started getting developed here, and that's something I'm eager to talk about here. One of which is depicted here on a poster behind us, and I hope we can get a nice lingering look at this, because Wonderland was, I've heard it subsequently described as almost the Disneyland of its era, which was a major development over here on, I think, between 31st Avenue and 33rd Avenue, Lake Street, and what we now would call 34th. So it took up the equivalent of 8 city blocks.
That's right. It took a lot of acreage to have fun, and and so that's why these things tended to develop out in this part of the city.
Okay.
One of the alternate names for Wonderland that they proposed at first was White City.
White City, because
and that wasn't related to race. This actually was an integrated neighborhood fairly early on, but it related to the electricity. That was the new thing on the scene.
Well, sure, that was a new thing to show and illuminate the night sky.
Yeah, and I don't know how much they spent in light bulbs on that place, but everything had light bulbs all over it. And one of the wonders of this place was all the great things you could do with electricity.
Well, and as you mentioned electricity, one of the things we researched was that there was about a two and a half stretch of Lake Street that got heavily illuminated for a while, and it was a great white way, I guess, if you would call it that. Sure.
That's right. That was a sign of being in the modern age, and people were really quite dazzled by it. It also was viewed as preventing crime, but they were really in it for the fun. That sort of bright, glaring electric light was viewed a little bit as romantic at certain periods too.
In those days, I guess, sure. Well, now, heading west along Lake Street, and just over our shoulder, we're here in the 5th Precinct, new building on the corner of 31st and Nicollet. But just across the way here is what's now a Norwest Bank building. But on that site was the Nicollet Ballpark.
That's right. As the city expanded in the downtown area, it squeezed the ballpark out from Hennepin down to here in the 1890s. This was the perfect place for it because you had the streetcar connections, you had the room to build it without having to buy up too much valuable property. And as the city continued to expand out this way, you had a new ingredient in the mix, and that was the automobile.
Sure.
This provided some accommodations for automobiles as it developed in the early 20th century too. Wow. The other piece of transportation I wanted to mention that's really tied into this development is the bicycle. Yeah. The bicycle became very popular in the 1890s, and
it was kind of newfangled in those days.
Well, it was a great companion to the streetcar. People might might ride the streetcar in ugly weather or at night, but they often would ride their bicycle along those same routes. And that allowed people to expand out a little farther from the downtown core, too. They actually had curbed bicycle lanes on Lake Street in the early 20th century.
Pretty progressive, I would
That's
think,
right.
in those days. Well, as those people were coming out by bike, by car, and as more people were living down, they'd come to the ballpark. I should mention, I'm an old baseball fan. Willie Mays, Ted Williams, Al Worthington, who Twins fans will remember, Gene Mauch, Bill Rigney, Herb Score, just a whole bunch of people that went on to great careers. I wanted to mention also another, as you progress a little bit further west on Lake Street, the old Minneapolis Arena, which I know that generations of people I know from local high schools would go there and either skate or watch their teams play hockey and things like that. And that was behind the Lehman building.
Right on DuPont there,
Yeah.
that's right. You know, in this late 19th century period, you saw people so concerned about exercise for health reasons. They understood that if you're going to be healthy, you can't stay cooped up in a city tenement somewhere. You have to get out and ride
that
your
fresh
bike
air
and go skating and get out to the lakes and go swimming. And so that whole ethic of being healthy really contributed to how Lake Street developed, too.
Well, that's a good point. I'm going to hold up here a pennant. One of our colleagues at the agency I work in, Jim Sutherland, happened to have in his personal collection this pennant here from the old, I guess called the Mighty Millers Minneapolis Hockey Club. And this is a team that played in that arena down
That's
there.
right.
So if you go behind the Lehman building, there's a little sunken parking lot, and that's what later developed into the arena. So thank you, Gene.
Yeah, these sports venues were important. It was also very popular for people to go swimming or boating, or sometimes in the winter even sailing ice boats on the city lakes, and you could get there conveniently along the streetcar. That streetcar did continue all the way up to Lake Minnetonka, too, in various forms.
Okay,
and
so all the way out to the amusements that were developed out there.
Even in the 1880s, you could get out there by what they called the motor line, and as the streetcar system continued to develop, you saw the resorts out on Big Island and then Excelsior Amusement Park tied into the transportation along Lake Street.
Well, back here on Lake Street, of course, there were a tremendous number of theaters that our researchers, our crack team, found, and we're going to call up a map right now that's going to depict for people, our viewers, where Wonderland was in the ballpark and the Minneapolis Arena. So we're going to take a look at that for just a quick second, and then on that we're going to superimpose, I think it was 30 or so theaters that existed over time along the Lake Street corridors.
Well, one of the things that happened in the 20th century with the popularity of electricity was the introduction of movies here now, too. And live theater had been very big in town for a long time because of so many people coming in from jobs on the farms and the lumber camps and that. But in the 20th century, as city life evolved, the movie became a real ritual, and live theater continued, and vaudeville continued in the mix and combination.
Near where they lived.
That's
apparently.
right.
Another thing that Lake Street was well known for were the auto dealers. Now we're going to superimpose also a list. All you're going to really see are I think, little tires or circles or something. But in the year 1950, again, our researchers found there were some 60 auto dealerships at that one time.
That's right.
Along Lake Street.
Lake Street was a great place to cruise up and down in your car and look at the car that you wanted to be driving in the lots. And of course, there were many used car lots. And in that age of the automobile, Lake Street was the place to be. The lights would make it shine nicely, and you'd polish up your car and you'd go up and down and maybe stop at the clubs along the way and hear some music. And it was quite a scene.
Well, and, as generations went on, there were the famous Porky's as great places for young people to go to.
Drive-in restaurant. That was a modern thing,
that's
too.
right. One on the West End and one over on East Lake Street as well. And we've got just a moment left. I want to mention things like New City Opera House, where kids went and heard the rock music of the 60s, and there were jazz clubs. So Lake Street really was a place that people came for generations and continue to come for amusement and attractions.
An important spine in the life of the city here.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dave Wiggins. Pleasure to have you here again. Well, our next topic, we're going to take a look at some of the success people have been having in battling crime along Lake Street. Some good news on that front. But first, let's take a quick look at some new developments that are happening along Lake Street. these things. So I try to. Well, that was just a quick look, just a little montage of a few of the new developments that are happening along Lake Street, and we'll take a longer discussion on that later in the show. Right now, we're going to take a look at a topic of crime and some of the success that the city of Minneapolis and its neighborhoods are having along the Lake Street corridor. With me to discuss it, Karen Skrivseth, who's a community crime prevention specialist, and Sergeant Mike Looney.
Hi.
Pleasure to have you both here. And you are actually what? You are her supervisor in a team. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Okay, and Karen, I just wanted to start out for folks who aren't familiar. Community crime prevention SAFE is what? It's a program of the city set up to do and accomplish what?
Basically to increase the communication between the community and the police department. People were feeling that, you know, by calling just 911 or calling the precinct desk, that it wasn't getting attention to problems that were long-term, that were repeated problems. So what was set up was basically teams of officers and civilians out there working in specific neighborhoods, assigned neighborhoods, to work on what are called livability issues. Sometimes they're criminal, sometimes they're not criminal. But they're issues that have affected the livability of the neighborhood, the peace of mind, their peace at night, their sense of safety in the neighborhood. And it's teams out there trying to increase the safety, the feeling of safety, and reduce the fear of crime out there in the neighborhoods. They're teams of officers and civilians partnered together. The civilians are called crime prevention specialists, and in Minneapolis there's 24 teams of officers and civilians.
Spread it off through the city.
Spread out through the city, and have districts assigned to them by neighborhoods, kind of like sales districts out there in the neighborhood.
Okay, I like that image, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
And you happen to be working out of the 3rd precinct,
Yes.
the two of you, and that's over in what I would call kind of the Hiawatha, Minnehaha, and Lake Street area. What's the geographic boundaries of that precinct? Is that?
Well, it runs, the western boundary is 35W. The eastern boundary is the river, north is 94, and the southern boundary is the crosstown.
Okay, so that's actually a good quadrant of the city that you folks
It's
are
the
responsible
largest
for.
geographic precinct
Yeah.
size-wise.
Okay. What are some of those livability issues that you most have to deal with, maybe at least in your part of town? I suppose it depends a little bit. Downtown might be a different kind of a call, or other parts of cities. But in your area, what do people mostly need your help on? Is it issues like graffiti and things like that?
Graffiti is a big one. People have a fear that it might be gang graffiti. There are a lot of very artistic people that use garages to what we call tagging, and not feeling that it's illegal, they think it's a form of artwork and leave their graffiti mark behind. And it is a very expensive crime, very quiet crime. It occurs oftentimes during the night. Many times there's no one that sees anything, but costs the homeowner or the business a great deal of money.
And it's not only an issue of money. I know that it can engender some fear, especially if people
Exactly.
think that that area has now been tagged or hit. So that's the reason to go out and try and help folks.
Exactly, yeah. And there is a lot of things that they can do, but it's getting the message out about calling 911, making sure they file a police report that it is a property crime, and then remove it as quickly as possible so it doesn't encourage more graffiti
Does
in
that
the
tend to
area.
help then if it's up and you remove it? I bet they maybe come back once or twice, but they probably get discouraged or something.
Absolutely,
that right?
absolutely. Yeah, it does.
Just keep hammering away.
Just keep hammering away, and then eventually it's one area that they don't want to hit anymore. They do love to repeat areas that they don't take down graffiti.
Oh, that's interesting. So
and add on.
they find a zone where they feel comfortable, like they're going to get away with it.
Right.
Is this true now? Going way back into my youth, when I once interviewed a police chief, he said, I was under the mistaken impression that you can stamp out crime. There's always going to be crime, but the issue is to keep it on the move. Is that part of the strategy?
Well, I would say prior to 1997, that was our philosophy.
Oh, okay.
Is you can't, crime is here and you just got to deal with it and
Part of
so
life,
on.
in a way.
That's right.
Yeah.
But in '97, Chief Olson initiated what an acronym Code 4, and it stands for Deploying Resources Based on Computer Tracking of Crime Trends. And what we found is by doing that we in fact are reducing crime, and fairly dramatically. In the 3rd precinct, for example, last year we reduced Part 1 crime, which is typically violent crime, by 19%.
Well, that's
which is
significant.
and citywide, I think we had over 6,000 fewer victims of Part 1 crime, and that includes homicide, rape, aggravated assault, auto theft, arson, and
So
I
pretty
can't
much
think of
those
the term.
serious ones where people's physical safety is in question.
Yes,
That's
those
pretty
are the,
impressive.
Yeah.
That's really good. And Code 4 is the moniker that describes that particular policy. That
Exactly.
effort. Well, that's great. I know you've had some success on your team with some other issues along Lake Street. There was a bar recently that had a number of problems, and you helped in identifying that and closing it down, or what happened there?
Well, actually, they did just get a suspension and needed to make some changes inside. The ownership lost control of the bar. They were getting customers that weren't buying liquor. They were there to sell drugs inside the bar. They were loitering. They were taking over the bar, and there really wasn't any transactions as far as what a bar would normally be set up for. So it involved the 3rd Precinct crack team, CERT team. It involved licensing. It involved community people were fantastic, other businesses as well as neighborhood residents. Everybody joining together to work on this issue. The owner also wanted to see some changes, but he and his wife had just lost total control of the bar and were basically looking for any type of help they could get. It did end up to be a suspension of their license. We dealt with drug dealing and prostitution in the bar.
Out of that location. Would it be fair to say that in a sense the owners were victims as well?
Exactly.
In other words, they weren't willingly participating in this behavior.
Right.
But theirs
Right.
was the venue. That's where it was happening.
And they had nowhere to go as far as they felt to get resources to improve the area. It had to finally come down to a police intervention to finally get them some help. And we're guiding them through changing the way their business looks inside and out, giving them security tips, using what we call crime prevention through environmental design, changing the way their bar is set up to discourage criminal behavior.
So actual design of the structure, is this the defensible space kind of
Exactly,
concept?
exactly.
Okay, very interesting.
They have a parking lot that you can drive through from Lake Street to 2nd Avenue and cut through, and deals were made behind the building by decreasing the availability of the parking lot from one area to another, restricting access to the parking lot is cutting down the traffic.
Fascinating. That's a nice way to solve some of those problems, or at least to deter them. I know prostitution historically was a problem along Lake Street, and you've been involved in some efforts along that score as well?
Right, right. And that is one thing that seems to move along. That's a crime that gets displaced oftentimes. Depends on the aggressiveness. Businesses along the Lake Street I've worked in are very aggressive. They've been taking down license numbers and turning them into our office, and we send out what are called Dear John letters, which aren't well received apparently by the recipient.
Especially if somebody else at home opens it, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Daddy? What is this letter?
They do call 911 quite a bit on the activities, and they've also got involved with the 3rd Precinct CERT team, community response team, which has done what is called both prostitution and John stings in the area. And as the enforcement and the activity of the residents and the businesses increase, the prostitution moves on to a different area that they feel they have more control over.
It would seem to me then that not only the residences, but on almost every major intersection along Lake Street, you've got businesses and commercial enterprises that would probably just benefit tremendously from this kind of solution that you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we get it out one word at a time or one business at a time. We door knock. We try to get it out as much as possible. But once it quiets down, once it gets very quiet in the area, they seem to think the problem's solved and they let things go. And all of a sudden, the prostitution gets displaced again and it's back again. So
Continual vigilance.
Exactly.
Got to keep going.
We have to keep active all the time.
So you're getting good cooperation in your teamwork with the businesses and the residents?
Absolutely.
Obviously, if there's a crisis, they want you right there.
And that's typically, unfortunately, that's typically what drives it is the value is only seen when there's a crisis or when there's a problem to address, which is what Karen was talking about. And trying to get people to be preventive,
Right.
to make the changes ahead of time, that's a struggle for us.
Well, and that brings up the issue, too, that half of this is enforcement. Somebody
Right.
commits a crime, you go out and you enforce the law, and they're brought to terms with that. And then there's the prevention. That's the other side of it as well. Later in our show here, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the new developments going on along Lake Street. And one of the big ones, at least just in terms of physical size, is the old Sears building, the Great Lake Center.
Right.
And you've been going to some meetings about that because there are going to be issues that have to be dealt with when that's up and running.
Right, and the nice thing about the Great Lakes Center, and one of the key principles in that, Ray Harris, is he's brought a lot of people to the table right away, even before he's begun to do construction and change things, talking about the streetscape that surrounds not only the Great Lakes Center, but several blocks in either direction,
Oh,
as
that's
well as
smart.
north and south in Chicago.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to have a unified plan as to what we want this streetscape to look like. And when I say we are doing, actually the police department only acts as a resource. We give information because we have some people with expertise in like CEPTED, the crime prevention through environmental design and that sort of thing. But it's up to the businesses and the neighborhoods who are also at the table to decide what they're willing to spend money on and what is a priority for them.
Right, so you help empower them, but then they have to take that power and commit to it.
That's
with some of their
correct.
own resources and things like that.
Right.
I want to ask you a kind of a general question, maybe either or both of you can answer this. Have you seen, what kind of trends have you seen along Lake Street in terms of crime? Are they different? Is it less of the assaults and the physical stuff and more, I don't know, what, fraudulent kinds of crimes? Or are there trends in what's happening now in our town?
Well, trends as far as now, I'm not so sure about. I mean, it tends to move along Lake Street.
Okay.
Prostitution is a prime example.
Right.
Where you put the pressure, it moves. Street level drug dealing, the same thing, where you put the pressure, it moves. Bloomin' Lake used to be one of the worst corners in the city of Minneapolis for street level drug dealing. Well, now they have beat officers that work that corner pretty much, I think it's 18 hours a day.
Well, that's impressive.
So it's moved.
Yeah.
And, well, it's either moved or been eliminated there,
Yeah.
so it finds other corridors. So in some respects, we're always chasing the mouse.
Right.
But in other respects, once we identify who these people are, we concentrate our efforts on them. And
maybe they get the
move
message
them.
that this isn't a good place to do business.
That would be
that
that
kind
would
of
be,
business.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
our preference, that they come to that decision on their own.
Yeah.
If they refuse to, then we help them by
Then you can step right on in.
taking them to the bar of justice.
That's right. Mike Looney, thank you very much. Pleasure to get a
welcome.
little overview. Karen,
Thank you.
pleasure to have you here. Thank you. Well, now, our next topic is going to be a look at the Midtown Greenway, a major development that's going to help unify the west end and the east end of Lake Street, all the way from Lake Calhoun area over to the river. But before that, let's take a little look at our factoid. Did you know? Very interesting fact. Stay tuned. Here we go. Anyhow, so one of the most fascinating things about that photograph are the oars those guys are holding. Now, the Minneapolis Rowing Club was started, as our factoid said, in 1877, so a great venerable organization. Well, our next conversation is going to be about other modes of mobility, and with me to talk about them, Larry Blackstad, who is with Hennepin Community Works.
Morning.
Nice to see you here. Thanks for being here. And Mary Lynn Pulscher.
Hi.
Nice to have you here. And you are on the board of Midtown Greenway Coalition, which is, I'm guessing that's a grassroots
Yep.
organization. Larry, very briefly, to set up for our viewers, can you just describe the Midtown Greenway in terms of its scope, its geographic boundaries, as it were?
The geographic boundaries run from France Avenue on the east to the Mississippi River, basically encompassing the whole city of Minneapolis, swath across all of Minneapolis. It runs about 6 miles.
Oh, okay.
The other part at France Avenue on the western boundary of the city connects into the Hennepin County Trail System, which takes you all the way out to Chaska and Carver Park, adding about another probably 20-some miles.
Tremendous
to the loop.
linkage then.
Yeah.
That's great. And Mary Lynn, in a word, and we're going to get into more of a discussion about this, the basic goal. What are we trying to accomplish with this Greenway?
The basic goal is to provide alternative forms of transportation, mainly biking or inline skating for commuters, recreational use, and to connect people from one side of the city to the other.
Well, thank you. That was very short and to the point. Let's take a quick pause here, something that I know Hennepin County put together. And the reason I wanted our viewers to take a look at this is that it shows kind of the existing trench
Yeah.
that's down there along that rail corridor. And then I believe the term is it kind of morphs into a vision of what it might actually look
Sure.
like. Just for a stretch, not the whole area that Larry described. But let's take a quick look at that one, and we'll be right back.
Lake Street was once a destination point for shopping and entertainment, as well as the main street of a thriving community. Today, the area lacks the amenities that would attract new jobs and consumers. Declining in property value, flirting with poverty, hanging on by a thread. The mission of Hennepin Community Works is to reverse the trend. The solution? The Midtown Greenway, a public-private partnership, creating a greenway to connect this area to existing park spaces, and also to serve as an economic generator.
Well, I think it's a pretty impressive project, Larry. How does this fit in with Hennepin County's overall goals of serving its citizens and its constituents?
Well, Hennepin Community Works was born out of a goal to look at infrastructure investments and how we can do them to enhance neighborhoods, create tax base, and create jobs. The Midtown corridor, we think, is a great example of that. We made the investment to buy the corridor about 12 years ago for light rail transit. Working with the coalition, we were able to help really bring to reality the concept of a commuter, cross-city commuter route using alternative means of transportation. So, and we know at this point in time we are getting additional interest in investment in the Midtown, in the Lake Street corridor. The corridor, while you said the Midtown corridor is basically the old train trench, Lake Street corridor is now an area that runs from about 26th to 31st, and we're starting to see new interest and new investment within that larger corridor, again, across the whole city, which we believe has been triggered by the plans and now the investment to go forward with the Midtown Greenway.
Well, at the very least, a great synergy there with this corridor. So congratulations. I think the vision alone is worth touting for this project.
We've been doing that.
That's great. And before we go on, I know that Hennepin Community works on a number of other projects as well. Could you just outline 2 or 3 other things that you're involved in?
The other really large project we have going right now is Humboldt Avenue Greenway. It's, again, taking a county highway, rebuilding it as more of a boulevard with a new park, connecting 2 Minneapolis schools, and connecting North Mississippi Regional Park to Shingle Creek Regional Park along 49th Avenue. The Humboldt project runs from about 46th to 53rd Avenues north and involves both the removal and the creation of over 200 new housing units, and including that is a 50-unit senior housing facility. There is no senior housing in this neighborhood today.
Oh, that's it. The Camden neighborhood, am I right, in the Minneapolis
It would
area?
be part of the Camden neighborhood. We actually encompass both the Lynn Bohan and Shingle Creek neighborhoods.
Okay, pretty impressive project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mary Lynn, actually behind us, in case you get a chance to see it, is Mary Lynn's personal bicycle, and you are an inveterate bicyclist. What is this greenway that's being developed? What is it going to mean specifically for bicyclists? I know there are other modes we're talking about, but just for bicyclists, what will it mean to you guys?
It means speed. It's essentially a nonstop corridor. I've been biking it now that the trails are out, and can't do that really yet, but it is just so much faster than taking a bus or driving a car. And it will interconnect with Uptown, where I actually do a lot of my shopping. It can get me out to St. Louis Park, see my parents and family, being able to interconnect with the Grand Rounds Parkway system. It will get you to the University of Minnesota really easily. You make it to the river and pop up, and you're right there. So I'm really excited about it.
And then when you say speed, I mean, in large part, it's because there aren't stops.
Right.
I mean, there aren't the stop lights, the stop signs.
We don't have it until
Traffic.
we have one at 5th by Honeywell. We have
that's
to
at
slow down.
grade.
That's at grade, where
Yeah.
Urban Ventures has a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
And then when we get to Hiawatha, and otherwise it is just nonstop, and it is really, really fast.
You mentioned getting to the university. 20-some years ago, a roommate of mine was a student at the university, and in those days, he would take his skis down to the rail corridor, and he would ski over to, I think, the Seward Yards there,
Yeah.
and then go north, and he would ski over to the university. So this is a great corridor. I mean, it really links major parts of the city, whether it's commercial or academic or whatever. Biggest challenges? Seems to me that there's a railroad that goes through there, and there's still the occasional
there is
train.
one active railroad customer. You know, the biggest challenge is the railroad. You know, how do we coexist is the first challenge, and secondly, we're working with the last commercial customer about moving out of the corridor so we can discontinue rail activity and then move really much more expediently with creation of the Greenway.
Okay, and so that discontinuance would be permanent. I mean, then that would be the end of that. Okay.
Right, right. The tracks are currently severed at Hiawatha, so any train traffic now is coming from the west.
And then returns that way.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's a pretty circuitous route for the trains. You know, it's
So to speak.
Yeah.
They got to back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone was asking me when we were researching this show why it was a trench. What was the history of making it below grade? And you're
You wanna do
smiling.
it?
Because I know with 94
It
and the
was-
interstates, those were trenched out as well.
It
and
was
they-
basically trenched to give the trains the ability to go across the city without
stops.
without any influence.
Well, and when you read the old newspaper articles, they talk about how terrible it was for the pedestrians to try and get across, and that women in long skirts could get across. Children were in danger, lives were in peril, and it's some really great language. And the solution was to trench it. And I think it's like the only one in the United States.
I don't know.
I
You
heard
know,
Well, and
something
it's somewhat
like that.
unusual too for Interstate 94 to be down like that. I know other people. I think David Letterman jokes that that's just a complicated snow fence or something to have the highway down there. But I think for neighbors, that's of great benefit. You know, you're not vulnerable to it. Let's talk a little bit about the coalition that you're part of. You're on the board. How large an organization is it, and how did it get started?
It got started with just a few people who wanted to make sure that there was citizen input as they started planning the trail corridor down there. We have a mailing list of about 500 people. There's 16 of us on the board, and we represent every neighborhood that touches Lake Street all the way across the city. And then we have representatives from the south side and north of the corridor. And we're really working right now to make sure it has the amenities that we want. Like to see some more public art down
Yes,
there.
I keep hearing about that. That sounds exciting.
Make it fun and accessible that way. Making sure that there's green space down there, and it's not just a bituminous blacktop corridor. We want to make
Right.
sure it's green and people really see it as an amenity.
That's great.
So.
And I know that when I get the mailings, I see a lot of participation by businesses that exist at the
Yes.
different nodes, I suppose, and along Lake
They've
Street.
been very
Because they care about this.
Right, they've been very supportive of us when we've done outreach things to make sure everybody knows about it as it goes in. They've donated food, money, help pay for mailings. They've been
pretty good.
they've been really great about it.
Yeah. Now, in the month of June, there was a little show and tell down along there. I know Larry and I were on a little train ride down there and took a look at it. And I was surprised at how little graffiti there is down there and how clean it is. You guys down there with bags and shovels?
Hennepin County
Yeah,
does
we
a great
have
job.
working with the County Railroad Authority, using the Sentence to Serve program, has a crew that works the Greenway.
That's ongoing then?
Ongoing.
Okay. Because I was
to
quite
keep the
impressed.
to maintain it. You know,
Yeah.
we try to be a good steward of
Yeah.
the lands we have. The graffiti, we get into a lot of debates, whether it's public art or
Yeah.
or
Those will be
not.
ongoing debates.
And yeah, it's sort of an ongoing debate. And
Yeah.
the normal response, usually we send the crews through and we paint it out.
Well, the reason I bring this up is because I think the first coalition meeting I ever went to, which was 3 years ago or something, there was discussion about the public art and the things that were down there and the graffiti, whatever. There was furniture, there were encampments. People were
Right.
basically living down there in some parts, and that's pretty much cleared out.
We've taken a much more aggressive posture about the security and the maintenance of the corridor.
Yeah.
So it's patrolled regularly. The new designs for the corridor will actually provide police patrol car access off the ramps right into the corridor. We'll have bicycle patrols
Yep.
down there. We'll have code blue phones. We'll have video surveillance. So security is a big issue.
Now,
Yes.
let me ask
before
one
about that.
specific one, though, because I was talking with some of our crime specialists, and they said, one concern is going to be egress. It's going to be a long corridor, and when you've got quick egress, and I know I'm that way, if I'm on a bridge or an overpass or something, and even if I don't see somebody, but as long as I know I can get out of there quickly, is that going to be a problem, and how will you address that if there's a significant stretch of this bike path or a hiking path, then you can't get off quickly?
I think about 4 blocks is the longest stretch. Then we have the ramps in and out. That's again where we have the phones. It'll be very well lit. Like now we're up to like 11 or 12 emergency phones, which are also video activated, tied to the 911 operator. Again, we will have all the ramps, the access points are designed to accommodate emergency vehicles in and out.
So there'll be quick response
It's
if
very
anything
quick
is going on.
response if there's a problem down there.
Well, and I
And we're
suppose
very
one of the
close to
solutions is to
precinct
have it really
stations.
animated.
And I think that's the
they wanna
really
give
big thing
people-
is that we're really looking for people to instead of have the Greenway be their back door, we want it as their front door. We want people to have, windows down there. I'm hoping that
Eyes on the street.
Eyes on the street. And I'm hoping as small businesses move in along the corridor, maybe they help pay for flights of stairs that go down and in, and it's outdoor.
At their locations.
Right, outdoor dining, and you would have
Yeah.
some sort of terrace structure, and you just have more people that could come
I know Ray Harris
in
is
and out.
hoping at his train shed there
Right.
might be some things.
Right,
there,
Yep.
so.
right. We're working with Ray around
And
those
the
issues.
urban village, there'll be houses
Right.
and things like that.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we're plumb out of time, but best of luck. Construction starts real soon, right?
Yes,
Right.
On the western third,
yep.
About a third, right.
roughly. I'm
Yeah.
making that
Yeah,
up. But,
from France to 5th.
That's true.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Big grand opening this fall. We'll race a bike versus a bus and a car, and we'll win.
Good for you. I look forward to that. We'll try and announce that here on Inside Minneapolis. Mary Lynn, thanks for
Okay,
being on the
thank
show.
you.
Pleasure.
All right,
Larry,
Phil,
thank
nice
you
to see
very much.
Bye-bye.
Well, we'll be back to discuss some of the new developments going on along Lake Street. But first, I just wanted to mention to you that we always have a segment in the show called What the Heck Is That?, where our crew goes out and takes a quick peek at something that you might see all the time, but you don't know what it is. So later in the show, we're going to ask a few people what the heck this is. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the 5th Precinct. I'm Inspector Christine Morris. I'm the precinct commander at this precinct. This precinct was completed in 1998. It's a very well-designed precinct. We enjoy being here. It's received 2 different awards, the Q Award and the American Architecture Award. We're located down at 31st and Nicollet, and we have some very nice neighbors here. Harriet Tubman is right next to us, and they're very pleased to have us as neighbors. This is an area that does tend to have a little bit higher crime rate, so it's a good location for the precinct to be in this community.
Put things together. So. Yeah. Okay. Well, we here at Inside Minneapolis want very much to thank the 5th Precinct, especially Inspector Morris, for inviting us in here. It's a nice facility, and we congratulate them on this. I believe it won an award, as a matter of fact, so that's pretty good. Well, our next conversation is about the some of the developments, some of the great activity that's going on along Lake Street now, today. And with me to discuss that issue is Robert Chong, who is a project coordinator at the Minneapolis Community Development Agency.
Hello, Phil. Good to see you again.
Colleague of mine, and Juan Linares, who's involved with a great project, Juan, the Mercado Central.
Yes.
And that's a specific project, and just for our viewers, where is that physically? Where will it be?
The location is in Bloomington and Lake, the southwest corner of Bloomington and Lake.
Okay, and I know that well because years ago I had an affiliation with the People's Bakery, which is across the street.
Kitty corner.
And there's a bank right across from where your
Correct.
site is, and a drugstore on the other corner.
Butler.
Yeah, Butler Drugs. Thank you very much. That's
Yes.
great. Bob, for folks who don't understand how a city responds to projects, for instance, Mercado Central, you work at the Minneapolis Community Development Agency, somebody calls or sends a letter and says, we've got an idea for something. How does the agency, maybe it comes to your phone, how do we respond to that kind of an idea? What's the first thing that happens?
Well, we receive many requests for financial assistance, and because the resources at the MCDA are limited, we provide gap financing, and we also try to target our assistance. And by gap financing, I mean that we look at a project where a developer has equity as well as bank or private financing, and the MCDA tries to leverage as much private financing as we can.
Okay.
The other thing is that we look at projects that meets the city's goals of providing housing or jobs as well as goods and services for city residents. The other thing is we look at projects that are also located in major commercial nodes that are located on Lake Street, such as Lindell and Lake, Nicollet Lake, 4th and Lake, Bloomington Lake, Chicago Lake,
Right.
and 27th and Lake.
Okay, well, thanks. That's pretty good. And right away, as you even described the financial relationships, it implies partners.
Right.
I mean, the developer comes in and he, she, or it needs to have some partners lined up already, maybe a bank or other equity partners.
Right. There's partners that are individuals, neighborhood groups, business groups, for-profits and non-profits, and it runs the gamut.
Sure. And Juan, I want to make sure people understand your role with the development of the Mercado. What are you personally doing on that project? I know you're an organizer.
Yes, actually, I am an organizer with Interfaith Action. And I've been working in this project for the last 3 years.
Oh, okay.
Out of Latino community in Whittier, which actually there's 4 neighborhoods, Whittier, Phillips, Powderhorn, and Central. Like the main concentration of the Latino community, which that's where I work primarily.
And the idea for the Mercado, where did that come from and how did just the idea develop?
That was a wonderful vision that the leadership of this community that worships out of St. Stephen's, which is where everything started about 3 years ago.
St. Stephen's Church down near Franklin on Clinton?
22nd and Clinton.
In Clinton, yeah.
Yes. There is a large Latino community that concentrates there on a Sunday basis. And actually, when I started working with this community, everybody was looking for opportunities, and basically what we did is we gathered the community, we organized with the community by using John McNice, one professor from Evanston, Illinois, a tool called Capacity Talent Inventory, which is one of the tools that we used, and we changed it to Hispanic Community Talent Inventory, and that gave us the...
And that's to find out what the capacity there was to meet certain needs that were identified?
How to move those
Okay, how to connect, again, getting back to partners.
Yes.
And as I understand with Mercado, there are a lot of partners involved, including, one of the community development?
Yes, actually PPL was the last partner to join the table.
Okay.
Basically was...
And that's Project for Pride in Living?
Yes, Project for Pride in Living, Neighborhood Development Center, Whittier CDC, Catholic Charities, and Interfaith Action. Basically, those are the partners that came in the table. And
well, in a minute or so, I want to talk more about specifically who will be at and working at Mercado when it opens later this year. But I wanted to broaden the conversation just a moment with Bob. There's a lot going on Lake Street, and a little bit on either side of Lake Street, again, from the Mississippi River on the east all the way to the west edge of the city. And I know you've been involved as a project coordinator in some. What are some of the things you've been working on over the last few years?
Well, I've been involved in many projects on Lake Street. At Lindale and Lake, I worked on the Jungle Theater project, as well as Intermedia Arts and the Art Space Calhoun building. Presently looking at reopening Nicollet Avenue here on Lake Street.
And when you say that, the notion there, and I know it's not a done deal, but what's the idea when you say reopening Nicollet at Lake? You're talking about?
Reconnecting the north and south portions of Nicollet Avenue as what it was before.
Right, so it's a through street.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
In other words, that commercial enterprise there might have to move a little?
Moved or shift, right.
Something
that's correct.
like that. Okay.
Right.
Good for you.
I'm also working at 4th and Lake. There's a former Ferris Alexander building there, which we sold to the neighborhood. That's another project I'm working on.
And some neat things going on in there, I know. The Central City Theater is in there.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then, let's see here, I'm working with the Mercado at Bloomington and Lake, and working on the YWCA project at 21st and Lake. So those are some of the projects.
That's over by Hiawatha there.
That's
So you're
correct.
kind of personally taking the gamut here from west to east.
Pretty much.
Now, in addition to the ones that you're working on, I know that there are lots of other developments going on. Can you just rattle off a couple of
Sure.
those?
There are lots of other developments that are being done privately, as well as with the MCDA. For example, on the west end of the city, there's the Calhoun Commons project that's being developed. There's the Urban Village, which is a residential project that's being developed in the Uptown area. There's the Great Lake Center at Chicago and Lake.
Once upon a time known affectionately as the Sears Building.
Right.
Yeah,
right,
which had been there for generations.
Right. And we're doing master planning for the LRT station at Hiawatha and Lake.
Right.
also.
So again, an important connection there with east-west connection of Lake Street with that more north and south connection along Hiawatha.
And then I believe on a previous segment, there's the 29th Street Midtown Greenway corridor that's also happening.
Well, very good point, yeah, and that parallels Lake Street itself. And I'm guessing when you mentioned the urban village, that's the notion of taking what I guess would be a couple of city blocks?
It's 3 blocks and putting approximately 200 units of new housing there.
And moving some current industrial use.
Right.
Was that generated, I don't mean to put you on the spot, was that generated in part because of the anticipation of the Greenway and some of these other projects?
I think that's part of it, and part of it is this new urbanism and the vision for that.
Okay, so in terms of the style and how this urban village will look and be programmed, there's that notion.
I think the relationship to the Greenway is also crucial.
Yeah, because I know it'll literally overlook it, and at least some of the units will be like right cheek by jowl there with.
That's right,
the
right
Greenway.
next to the Greenway.
That's pretty exciting. Well, my old stomping ground, Juan, is over by Bloomington and Lake, and it's an area that I know well. Why there specifically? What landed you at that corner?
I do believe that the commercial club of Bloomington and Lake was the instigator of this through the NRP and other organizations like Lake Street Partners target that southwest corner to be redeveloped.
Okay, so there was a bit of an invitation. They'd heard about the project, said,
Yes.
we'd like to see you here.
Actually, it was Ingebrigtsen's business, and Lisa Kluger, who is one of the staff persons for Prayer for Pride and Living, who approached us when they heard that we were looking for a building.
Okay.
And,
So the word got out.
Right.
Yeah.
Really fast. But it was great. I think timing was perfect for us. We didn't know what we were going to do, but actually we were looking for somewhere between 10,000 and 14,000 square feet to house approximately 40 vendors under one roof.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I want to let our viewers know a little bit about what they would encounter once the Mercado is open. Who's going to be there, and what will they be doing and selling and offering to people?
Basically, we're looking at two markets. The Latino market, which will be the primary market, and the secondary market will be the rest of the community. The Latino market, what that means is that we will have basic products, which are the basic diets that we eat, like tortillas, bread, pan dulce, and all kinds of fresh produce, tamales, and things like that. But on the other hand, we will have also artesanía, which it's kind of like the craft, handmade products from all over the Latin American countries. We have a business from Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico.
That's pretty impressive,
So
sure.
It's a variety of...
Now, have you done a market study? Are you expecting the Anglo shopper to come in, getting the word out to them? And
Yes, we have. I had the opportunity to go to San Antonio and take a look at a market down there. We went to Chicago. I also had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles, which the Olvera market is not quite what we had in mind, but it's close. So what we learned is what not to do.
Well, those are good lessons.
So basically what we did is try to figure out a variety of businesses that will encompass what the Latinos will be coming to this place for, and also we're planning and doing more cultural events, as well as inviting not just the Anglo or the rest of the world, I suppose, to the Mercado, but through culture, to arts, music, and
celebrate the culture as it is.
Basically.
We're just out of time, but I want to make sure it's. I know you can't give me an exact date, but you hope to see it open about when?
Well, we're looking at probably the end of July.
Okay.
We were targeted to open within 4 or 5 weeks, but it's not going to be possible due to things out of control. But
takes a little while. Well, Juan, very, very pleased to learn more about the Mercado. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Robert, nice to see you.
Phill.
Thanks
Good
for
to
being
see you
here.
again.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, we always do a little segment about what the heck is that. It's an interesting and intriguing image this time. Let's go out onto the street and get maybe a few wrong answers as to what the heck that is.
I don't know, it looks like it's in a cemetery. Looks like something that would hold a log up with another one opposite it. Stage prop for the Broadway of the Hobbit.
That is what Marie Antoinette was really beheaded on.
I think it's a sacrificial trees god to the gnomes. I think it's what they train little kids on to ride horses, saddle type thing.
Petrified wood.
I think it's an old guillotine.
I think it's a poor witch that was just beheaded.
Some kind of statue of a tree, stone statue.
No, I don't know. A tree stump with eyes on each side. I really don't know for sure.
Well, those maybe weren't right, but let's go to Carlo for the right answer.
Hi, Phil. I'm Carlo, and I'm at the Pioneers and Soldiers Cemetery. And this is a headstone. The person buried beneath this headstone belonged to a fraternal organization called Woodmen of the World about 100 years ago. That organization was dedicated to the preservation of forests, so it chose the most appropriate headstone. Back to you, Phil.
Thank you, Carlo. Good to know.
Hope you enjoyed this edition of Inside Minneapolis, and come back next month because we're going to take another look behind the scenes in this great city. Now, at the end of the show is our catalog of useful resources, and paired with that catalog is a before and after image of the Calhoun Theater. It's down on West Lake Street near Hennepin and Lake, and that operated in the early part of this century as the theater. And alongside of our credits is a nice image of the Nicollet Ballpark. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next month. I'm Phill Lindsay.